In the dense jungles of Southeast Asia, amid the chaos of war, one man emerged as a symbol of resilience, leadership, and an unwavering commitment to his people. His name, Vang Pao, would become legendary, not just in the history of Laos, but in the untold story of the Hmong people. In the mountainous reaches of Phutong, within Nong Het sub-district, in the district of Muang Kham, inside Xieng Khouang Province, Laos, a figure destined for the annals of history emerged. On the 8th of December 1929, Vang Pao was born to Phutong, Neng, a village official, and his wife, Zong Tao. Neng held a position of Phutong, or village chieftain, serving as a mediator in the social and familial disputes that arose in the close-knit Hmong mountain village. Like most families in the Nong Het area, Vang Pao's family made their livelihood by farming, the timeless rhythms of agriculture and livestock serving as the backbone of their existence. By the 1930s, Vang Pao began his formal education under the tutelage of a private Lao teacher, a luxury that was afforded to few, if any, rural Hmong village children at the time. In 1942, Vang Pao ventured beyond his family's village to attend an elementary school sponsored by the French, part of a broader network of Hmong schools established along Colonial Route 7, championed by the indomitable Touby Lyfoung. It was here that Vang Pao's keen intellect began to shine, though only making it to third grade level. From contemporaries and veterans that grew up with Vang Pao in Nong Het, Vang Pao was known as a bundle of endless energy, getting into fights, having racing competitions with other boys, and flirting with schoolgirls and younger teen beauties at their home. This smart, restless, and enterprising young man was, however, soon met with fate. A world war had arrived to the remote Hmong mountains in Laos. The Japanese had taken effective control over French Indochina, and they began probing from Vietnam to the hinterland, coming to the doorstep of Nong Het, Laos. The Hmong had an uneasy coexistence with the Japanese. Pretty soon, Touby Lyfoung, the Hmong leader of the Nong Het area, started covert operations against the Japanese with the help of Free French commandos airdropped onto the Plain of Jars. Then the Hmong began to fight back against the brutal and oppressive Japanese. The intelligent, tough, and naughty boy was called by destiny. By 1944, he left formal education behind to pursue a more immediate and perilous calling, aiding the Hmong leader Touby Lyfoung in resisting the Japanese occupation of Laos. The year 1945 marked a turning point in the fate of Laos and its people. The Japanese threat loomed large, and as the winds of conflict swept across Indochina, Touby Lyfoung, now aligned with the French, began to resist the invaders openly. It was in these turbulent days that Vang Pao, already demonstrating quickness, intelligence, and tenacity, found his place. He became a trusted courier for Touby, whose resistance efforts depended on such reliable and skilled young boys and men. As the Japanese threat pressed ever closer, the young Vang Pao's responsibility expanded. He soon became a vital asset in the struggle, tasked with gathering intelligence and disrupting enemy communications. Vang Pao's first true test of grit and dependability came when he was sent by Touby to Sam Ne to aid fleeing French officials from Tang Het. There he uncovered the gruesome aftermath of Japanese executions, retrieving and burying the remains of fallen Frenchmen. In the month that followed, Vang Pao's role only grew in importance, which he was sent by Touby to Luang Prabang as part of Touby Lyfoung's column, which was tasked with rescuing the king of Laos. In the years that followed World War II and the rise of the Viet Minh communists inside of Laos, Vang Pao's military career blossomed. By 1947, with Laos now a semi-autonomous colony of France, he joined the newly established colonial police force of Xieng Khouang under French Lieutenant Tricot, where he quickly advanced to the rank of corporal. By 1948, he soon attended the desirous French-run Gendarmerie NCO school in Luang Prabang in 1949, where his exceptional tactical abilities earned him the respect of his instructors. But it was his unyielding bravery, coupled with a natural affinity for leadership, that marked Vang Pao for greatness. By year-end 1950, Vang Pao was sent for sergeant training in Vientiane by his French commanders. While Vang Pao was away for schooling, his father, Neng passed away. Vang Pao never saw his father's funeral service. His family wrote him a letter to inform him of his father's death only. In 1951, Vang Pao joined the French GCMA, or Mixed Airborne Commando Group, becoming a vital member of Commando 200. Vang Pao's small platoon of Hmong soldiers soon gained a reputation for both discipline and effectiveness in the struggle against the Viet Minh, a force that would shape Vang Pao's destiny for years to come. By 1952, the situation in Laos had become dire, with the French forces enduring relentless ambushes by the Viet Minh. The French military, lacking the necessary intelligence and local knowledge to combat this unyielding foe, turned to the indigenous Hmong for assistance. Now stationed in Muang Nhan, a crucial mission was thrusted upon Vang Pao. The young Hmong soldier, then without rank in the Lao Territorial Army, was asked to uncover the locations and plans of Viet Minh troops in the area. Vang Pao, aware of the difficult task, one that had eluded the French for weeks, cautioned the officer that he could not guarantee success, but the French urged him to try. What the French commander did not know was that the young man before him was already displaying a resourcefulness and strategic mind far beyond his years. Armed with French small automatic weapons and just 30 rounds of ammunition, Vang Pao set off with a small group of Hmong soldiers, leaving the safety of the post to track the elusive Viet Minh. The terrain was treacherous. The Viet Minh had mined the main trails, but Vang Pao, with his keen knowledge of the land, led his men into the jungle, where they navigated using only a compass. After days of searching, they arrived at the area where Vang Pao believed the enemy might be hiding. It was there that they encountered a young Hmong couple working in their cornfield on the mountainside. Vang Pao, ever the strategist, approached them with warmth and curiosity. Sitting down to speak with them, he learned that the couple had just recently married. In a move that would become a hallmark of his leadership style, Vang Pao simply listened. They spoke for hours about their lives, their families, and their wedding, without Vang Pao once mentioning the mission. When the conversation finally turned to business, Vang Pao gently asked the bride if she knew anything about a group of Viet Minh in the area. She nodded, revealing that a group of 13 Viet Minh soldiers had been organizing the local population. She drew him a map and gave directions to their camp, providing him with invaluable information. With the bridge groom as their guide, Vang Pao and his team moved closer to the Viet Minh encampment under the cover of darkness. They approached from the mountainside, taking an unguarded route through the jungle, an approach the Viet Minh would not expect. Once in position, Vang Pao and his men waited patiently in the bamboo forest, their eyes trained on the suspected hut. Peering through the split bamboo walls, Vang Pao saw a group of 13 Dien Bien soldiers gathered around a fire, relaxed and unaware of the impending danger. Outnumbered and outgunned with only small arms and limited ammunition, Vang Pao knew that he had to act swiftly. His team surrounded the hut silently, and they fired into the walls, catching the Dien Bien soldiers off guard. The battle was brief. As they approached the hut, an enemy soldier bolted for the door and fled into the darkness. Vang Pao, relentless and swift, gave chase. After 300 meters, he captured the soldier and brought him back to his team. Vang Pao found crucial documents and maps, plans detailing imminent Vietnam operations against French posts in the area. The information would prove vital in disrupting the enemy's movements and bolstering the French resistance efforts. Vang Pao's daring and strategic thinking had not only secured critical intelligence, but also had demonstrated the invaluable role of the Hmong in the ongoing struggle for the control of Laos. Exhausted but resolute, the weary Hmong fighters made their way back to Mon Nha, presenting the French commander with 11 enemy rifles. However, the French, though pleased with their previous success, had another urgent mission for them. Intelligence had arrived that the Vic men were preparing to launch an attack on Son Nha as soon as additional reinforcements arrived. Vang Pao's mission was clear: intercept these reinforcements before they could reach the target. The French commander, undeterred by the fatigue of Vang Pao's men, ordered him to leave that night to disrupt the enemy's advance. Vang Pao, ever mindful of his men's condition, protested, explaining that they were too tired to march any further. The commander, however, insisted, pointing out that only the Hmong had the endurance and skills to maintain the rapid pace necessary to intercept the incoming troops. Realizing the urgency of the situation, Vang Pao relented, and his men, though weary, were restocked with ammunition and a machine gun. The group marched through the night driven by a single goal. When the time dawn approached, they stumbled upon a group of soldiers preparing breakfast. Vang Pao, ever the tactician, quickly surveyed the scene through binoculars and identified the soldiers as Viet Minh. Without hesitation, he set up the machine gun, and his men, armed with small arms, crept closer. As the unsuspecting Dien Bien soldiers continued their morning routine, Vang Pao opened fire, sending several of them toppling to the ground. In the chaos, one Dien Bien soldier scrambled to his feet and dashed for higher ground, attempting to flee. Vang Pao, determined not to let him escape, immediately gave chase. For over a kilometer this time, the enemy soldier held a considerable lead. But Vang Pao, unrelenting and fueled by sheer determination, began to ding around. Just as he neared the soldier, the Viet Minh turned and hurled a hand grenade in Vang Pao's direction. The grenade exploded nearby, but Vang Pao, unharmed and undeterred, continued his pursuit. The chase came to an end as Vang Pao closed in on the soldier, capturing him and bringing him back to his team. In the soldier's possession, they found more valuable military documents, plans detailing Dien Bien movements and strategies. Once again, Vang Pao had completed his successful mission, returning with critical intelligence and no friendly casualties to report. His leadership, decisiveness, and unyielding persistence in the face of danger had once again proven invaluable to the French cause. In a historic conversation with his commander, Captain Frere, Vang Pao was urged to take the next step in his military career. Vang Pao, Frere said, "I hope you are not just a soldier. I hope you are an officer." Vang Pao's response was swift and resolute. "I am not an officer. I am only a lowly soldier." Yet Frere would not be swayed, declaring that Vang Pao must become an officer. The rest, as they say, is history. Within months, Vang Pao was enrolled in the French officer training school in Dong Het, Savannakhet, where he would go on and excelled in tactics and operations. Despite his limited education, his brilliance in military strategy earned him the respect of both his peers and superiors. One of the traditions at the Dong Het Officer Candidate School was a 2.5 mile foot race in full uniform, which Vang Pao was one of the few cadets that excelled at it. Vang Pao actually set the record, finishing at just 14 minutes. He graduated 7th in his class out of 56 cadets, a testament to his dedication, intelligence, and resolve. In the following years that followed, Vang Pao's role in the military would grow exponentially. By 1952, he had become one of the most prominent Hmong leaders in the region, gaining recognition as a formidable tactician and leader among his people. His journey from the jungles of Laos to the halls of military command would shape not only the course of his life, but the future of the Hmong people as well. In March 1952, Vang Pao was dispatched to Nong Het, where he was placed in charge of CGN 4T, a Garde Nationale company. The unit, a mix of Lao lowlanders and Hmong soldiers, was fraught with tensions, both racial and military. The company was situated on the front lines, directly in the path of the Viet Minh's advancing 316th Division. The Viet Minh, under the famous General Vo Nguyen Giap, sought to stretch the French Union forces over a wider perimeter, launched a massive invasion into Laos. A three-pronged attack came in the form of the 308th, 312th, and 316th Divisions striking into Laos. All French resources were redirected to defend Laos and the French bases therein. Under orders from Vientiane Captain Kokustagi, the post's commander was tasked with holding the line belaying the enemy's march. The soldiers dug trenches, fortified positions, and braced for the inevitable assault. As the Viet Minh approached, retreating French soldiers, exhausted from relentless marches, began arriving in small, disheveled groups. The B-26 bomber flew low over the advancing enemy, followed by a series of helicopters which passed overhead, laden with wounded men. The relentless tide of the war pressed ever closer. Kokostagi received grim reports over the field radio. Nong Het, Xieng Khouang and Nong Het had fallen to the communists. Yet despite the dire news, the French stood firm. When news arrived that the Viet Minh had amassed 15 battalions on their way to Nong Het, Kokostagi was ordered to abandon the post. Under the cover of darkness, he devised a ruse to mislead the enemy. Torches were lit and the dinner bugle was sounded to give the appearance of a garrison settling in for the night. Luckily, the Vietnamese did not discover the trick until the following morning. Vang Pao, the only officer at the post, with intimate knowledge of the surrounding mountains, was put in charge of leading the retreat. The column moved out into the wilderness, with Vang Pao guiding them through rugged trails and dense forests. The French soldiers, unaccustomed to the mountainous terrain, urged him to take them down into the valleys, where the journey might be easier. Against better judgment, Vang Pao complied. It was a costly decision. As they descended, they were ambushed by the Viet Minh, and the lowland Lao soldiers, panicked and disoriented, dropped their rifles and fled. Vang Pao and the Hmong, however, remained unshaken. The remaining French officers followed his lead, rallied to his side. The column, now fractured, continued their difficult march through the mountains. Kokostagi, too exhausted to continue, was left behind in a Hmong village to recuperate. Vang Pao pressed on, guiding his men to the plain of jars where he would regroup and continue his mission. Weeks later, Kokostagi joined them, but the 14th Company was no more. It had been disbanded, its numbers decimated by the journey. In October 1953, Captain Jean Sassy, a seasoned French commando with working relationship with Touby and the Hmong during World War II, returned to Laos after a tour in Africa and Vietnam. His mission was to train and lead indigenous forces in the fight against the Viet Minh. At the Cong garrison, Sassy renewed his friendship with Touby Lyfoung, whom he had met in 1945. It was here that Ceci first encountered Vang Pao, now a commissioned officer and serving alongside French Lieutenant Next Mesmi, leading the Miao or Hmong Marquis guerrilla. Ceci, ever the keen observer, was struck by the young Hmong officer's prowess. Vang Pao's eyes, darting and quick, saw it all, Ceci later recounted. He reminded me of a panther. In one of their first joint missions, Vang Pao displayed his keen ability to read the jungle. He stalked his men suddenly, signaling them to remain silent. The French officers, unable to discern the cause, followed Vang Pao's pointed gesture. Then, with the swiftness of a predator, he raised his carbine, shot, and brought down a bird. The French, amazed, realized that Vang Pao's mastery of the jungle was unparalleled. Vang Pao and his men were magnifiques in the jungle, Captain Ceci wrote. The jungle was their habitat and they thrived in it. By November 1954, Vang Pao found himself at the helm of just 74 Hmong soldiers, a meager force in the face of an impending Viet Minh invasion consuming the Samé region. On November 16, while attempting to save his nephew, Cong during an enemy pursuit in Nong Het, Vang Pao was wounded. The bullet passed through Tom's abdomen and struck Vang Pao's belt before veering to the left. Cong died instantly. Vang Pao was greatly injured, yet he survived. The dangers Vang Pao endured through were insurmountable. In the larger picture of the war, by the fall of 1953, the French High Command, in an effort to safeguard Laos and trap General Vo Nguyen Giap's Viet Minh forces, initiated a bold strategy. In late November, French paratroopers retook Dien Bien Phu in northern Vietnam, hoping to deny the Viet Minh a key stronghold from which they could launch attacks into Laos. The trap was set, and General Navarre, the overall commander of French troops in Indochina, believed it would deal a final blow to the Viet Minh's ambitions in Indochina. Dien Bien Phu, nicknamed the Hedgehog by some, was defended by 12,000 men, including around 200 Hmong soldiers, along with French tanks, howitzers, and airfields. General Giap's forces, however, occupied the surrounding high ground. The battle for the French garrison grew increasingly desperate as supplies dwindled and Viet Minh artillery fire rained down. As the situation worsened, Captain Ceci, working closely with Touby, developed Operation D, a plan to break the siege by sending the Miao Marti into the rear of the Viet Minh forces to harass them and create a distraction. However, French logistical support for the operation was denied, and the French and the Marquis would have to carry out the mission on their own. Undeterred, Ceci and Vang Pao began a forced march from the Plain of Jars towards Dien Bien Phu. In the chaos of the battle, as the Viet Minh tightened their grip, the Operation D was given the new name Operation Desperate. Despite the mounting obstacles, both French and Hmong forces pressed on, believing that their cause was just and that victory would eventually be theirs. By the time they reached the outskirts of Dien Bien Phu, the French garrison had already fallen. The message came over the radio: Dien Bien Phu est tombé. That was it. The French base at Dien Bien Phu fell on May 7, 1954. The French and Hmong forces, disheartened but not defeated, would now focus on rescuing the survivors. Meanwhile, in the serene city of Geneva, amidst the towering Alps and the lush landscapes of Switzerland, a significant diplomatic gathering took place in mid-May 1954. France, the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, the non-communist Associated States of Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, the United States, Britain, the People's Republic of China, and the Soviet Union assembled to negotiate a ceasefire and establish what was hoped to be an acceptable peace for Indochina. The conference, however, proved to be a battleground for more than just formal diplomacy. The Viet Minh, with their mastery of guerrilla diplomacy, skillfully maneuvered their interests, even demanding seats for their representatives from Cambodia and Laos, territories where their influence had been surreptitiously growing. At the time, the Pathet Lao, the Viet Minh's Lao counterpart, and their delegates arrived in Geneva on a North Vietnamese passport. Their request for formal recognition was denied, a subtle but strategic victory for the French and the Royal Lao government, as the Viet Minh delegation cleverly disclaimed any military presence in Laos. In truth, thousands of Viet Minh soldiers and political cadres were operating within the country. This deception allowed the Viet Minh to maintain control in key regions, continuing their expansionist aims unopposed. The Viet Minh's strategy, embodied by their leader Ho Chi Minh's concept of Hoa De Tien, fighting to negotiate, rooted in the idea that treaties were merely temporary agreements, tools for buying time to reorganize and resupply their forces while disarming and weakening their enemies. While the Geneva Accords did confirm the sovereign right of the Royal Lao government to establish its administration in the two northern provinces of Phong Sa Ly and Sam Nue, the Pathet Lao and Viet Minh flagrantly ignored the accords. In defiance, they established schools, appointed local officials, and created a parallel government structure in these areas, turning them into what amounted to a de facto Pathet Lao state. The accords also established the International Control Commission, or ICC, to monitor ceasefire violations. However, the Vietnamese refusal to address the presence of Viet Minh forces in Laos or set any terms for the reintegration of Pathet Lao troops meant that these forces remained entrenched. The result was a systematic circumvention of the Accord's intentions, an ominous harbinger for the Royal Lao government. The Hmong leaders, who were already wary of the Vietnamese, summed up the sentiment of the time. Do not worry about the words in Geneva, they are only words. Worry about the Vietnamese soldiers in Laos. They are real. As the Viet Minh expanded their grip, their cadre and student Pathet Lao surrogates divided and instilled fear among the Hmong population. In the provinces of Sam Nue and Phong Sa Ly, communist operatives coerced and terrorized Hmong villagers, persuading them to become, quote-unquote, volunteers for the cause. Villages were organized into cells, women's groups, youth brigades, and occupational sectors such as weavers, farmers, and gunsmiths, all under the watchful eye of the communist authority. Entire villages were forced into slave labor, toiling as porters or working on road construction projects, their labor cloaked in the guise of patriotism. Those who defied the communist cadres were severely punished, often deported to North Vietnam for quote-unquote re-education, many never to return. The Royal Lao government, distant and weakened by the influence of the Viet Minh, could do little to protect its people, leaving the responsibility to the Hmong Maquis, an indigenous resistance movement. Among the most stalwart of the Maquis was Captain Jean Sassy, who now as military advisor to the Royal Lao government, he worked closely with Lieutenant Vang Pao to integrate the Maquis into the regular Lao forces. As Sassy prepared to leave Laos in early 1955, his thoughts turned to the future. He had witnessed the birth of an independent Laos, a country that had preserved its king, its government, and its army. The Maquis, under Sassy's guidance, had repelled the Viet Minh in several engagements, maintaining a semblance of stability. However, after Dien Bien Phu and the Geneva Accords, the French military presence was now limited. and only the American forces in Vientiane seemed poised to step in. Cécy's final visit to the Plain of Jars was gloomy, where he bid farewell to Touby and Vang Pao, which would mark the end of an era. Our goodbye on the Plain of Jars was in the nature of au revoir. Until we meet again, Cécy wrote. Unfortunately, that reunion would never come. In December 1954, Vang Pao was promoted to captain and became the senior Hmong officer in the Royal Lao Army. He retained command of the Hmong guerrilla forces in Xieng Khouang Province, now designated as BD-21. With France out in Indochina, America stepped in to stem the rising tide of communism. By 1955, U.S. Operations Missions Program Evaluation Office, or PEO, was formed, and the first American military advisors arrived in Laos. The first American Vang Pao met was Jack Matthews, a PEO advisor, marked the beginning of a new chapter in the Lao conflict and in the Hmong resistance going forward. For Vang Pao and his forces, the struggle was far from over. The promises made in Geneva were nothing more than words, and the fight for Laos's future was a battle that would continue to unfold in the jungles and mountains for years to come. By 1957, the Royal Lao government and the communist Pathet Lao reached an agreement, establishing their first coalition government as part of the new political landscape. Captain Vang Pao was tasked with leading a reconstituted old Hmong Maquis force called Melo under the 21st Volunteer Battalion, stationed at Mont Pun for military duty. In 1958, Vang Pao was recalled to Chinamel in Vientiane to attend a battalion commander's course, followed by a counterinsurgency seminar in the Philippines, organized by the Filipino Armed Forces. Lots of insights on guerrilla warfare, Vang Pao recalled, an experience that would shape his leadership in the years to come. Upon returning to Laos in early 1959, Vang Pao was named director of an NCO school slated for Cong. However, the school was disbanded shortly after its opening, and Vang Pao was reassigned to command the newly reconstituted BI-10, headquartered still on the Plain of Jars. The coalition government had given Vang Pao a formidable task: to accelerate the disarmament and reintegration of the Pathet Lao forces into the Royal Lao Army. To assess the intentions of the Pathet Lao, Vang Pao visited their stronghold, the Pathet Lao's 2nd Battalion base on the Plain of Jars. Inside, he discovered NVA officers and an all-Hmong unit commanded by Saichu To Tuya, who would later become the commander of all Hmong forces in the Pathet Lao. Vang Pao confronted Colonel Chan Niem, a Thai Vietnamese commander of the battalion, but the colonel was evasive, offering little insight into their plans. Vang Pao departed with the conviction that a military operation would soon be necessary, and he reported his findings to his superiors. Determined to act swiftly, Vang Pao set up camp on a summit overlooking the base. A Lao captain, Vong Suvan Ketsana, was already in motion, positioned to guard the road to Ban Mon, the likely escape route for the 2nd Battalion. Around midnight, Vang Pao saw flames rising from the base, signaling that the Pathet Lao had evacuated and set their camp on fire. He dispatched scouts to track their movements and quickly set off in pursuit, hoping to corner the retreating battalion. However, Ketsana allowed the 2nd Battalion to slip past him without firing a shot. Vang Pao, incredulous and enraged, confronted Ketsana, only to be told that his Buddhist faith prohibited him from taking human life. This revelation revealed a fundamental weakness in the Royal Lao Army. Its soldiers, like Ketsana, were unwilling to engage in the brutal combat necessary to defeat the enemy. Vang Pao, undeterred, immediately began a forced march through a torrential rainstorm. determined to catch up with the Pathet Lao forces. On 3 separate occasions, Vang Pao's battalion briefly closed in on the retreating enemy, killing 3 Pathet Lao officers and wounding Colonel Chant. Yet despite Vang Pao's relentless pursuit, the 2nd Battalion continued to widen the gap, sprinting towards the border. Vang Pao, now certain that the 2nd Battalion was heading for the border mountains and into Vietnam. He suspected that Chant, along with a unit of Cong commandos, the NVA's infamous suicide squads, was already positioned there to cover the Pathet Lao's escape. Confident in his abilities to clear the NVA off the mountain, Vang Pao asked for volunteers. While the lowland Lao soldiers refused, one Hmong soldier, Touby Lyfoung, who had previously served with Vang Pao and Mong Yan, stepped forward. Together, Vang Pao and Touby Lyfoung climbed the mountain, each providing cover for the other as they advanced. Darting from boulder to boulder, they encountered the Cong entrenched in 2-man trenches spaced 20 yards apart. The 2 Vietnamese soldiers in the first trench spotted them and rose to fire. Before they could take aim, Vang Pao and Touby Lyfoung swiftly cut them down. They moved from trench to trench, eliminating enemy soldiers with precision and efficiency. After killing the 12th Cong soldier, the remaining troops fled. By the time Vang Pao's forces reached the pass, the 2nd Battalion had already crossed into Vietnam, heading towards Muang Sen. The mixed composition, the BI-10, lowland Lao and Hmong, had always been a source of tension, and as in previous units, the Lao soldiers were reluctant to take orders from a hill tribesman such as Vang Pao. These growing rifts came to a head in early 1960, when Vang Pao, fearing threats from his own men, sought refuge with the American PEO Hotfoot Detachment at Cong. In December of 1960, a Captain Cong of the Royal Lao Army launched a coup to take over Laos. Cong sought a neutralist Laos, ordering Major Vang Pao and all right-wing Lao military personnel to surrender. Vang Pao and his Hmong soldiers refused, remaining steadfast in their commitment to the Royal Lao government in its fight against communist forces. From this crossroad in history, the ultimate rise of Vang Pao and the Hmong as defenders of Laos will be born.